The 2023 NHL playoffs are just days away, and only one playoff series has been locked in so far, and it's been locked in since basically December. So, here today, we will be breaking down the Toronto Maple Leafs Tampa Bay Lightning rematch. Are there concerns for either team? Who has the edge in goal? How do the power plays match up? What is your best bet? And what is your series prediction? Welcome back to Edgework here on the Hammer Betting Network. Usually we are live every Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, giving daily picks and previews. But as we get closer and closer to playoffs here, we will start putting out our series projections, our breakdowns, best bets for each series, whether it be player props or series spreads, bets just in terms of who's going to win the series, lose the series, all that kind of stuff. So this is the first one of the series, I guess you could say. Toronto, Tampa Bay. The series we've known has going to be a thing since basically December, one of the more anticipated ones, especially considering what happened last year, going to 7 yet again for the Toronto Maple Leafs, losing 6 consecutive seasons in the first round, if you include the play-in round that they lost to Columbus as a playoff series, lost there. But joined today by Dom from The Athletic. Dom, you can find him over there on The Athletic doing player cards, season predictions, as well as series projections. Dom, how's it going today?
Not too bad. A little nervous about this particular series, obviously.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's pretty much sentiment echoed by majority of Leafs fans as it goes. No matter what the price is or how different the team is, it's basically going to be the same feeling. But also Michael Leboff, you can find him doing NHL, soccer, and darts for the Action Network, as well as the Islanders Anxiety podcast. Michael, welcome, and how's it going today?
It's a great day to be an Islanders fan, man. It's a great day. It's always a great day to be an Islanders fan, but this one in particular is really special. So we'll be seeing, you'll be seeing a lot of us over these next few weeks, I'm pretty sure. And so Money knows it too.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially Islanders just lock up playoff spot there, eliminate the Pittsburgh Penguins for the first time in 16 seasons that they're going to miss the playoffs. First time So Money and I talked about since 2006, no Crosby and Ovechkin in the playoffs. So yeah, shout out to the Islanders there for getting themselves in and launching themselves past the Pittsburgh Penguins. But finally, So Money, the man, the myth, the legend, one of the most consistent people that you see here on the Edgework channel doing daily picks and previews, and a man who has no shame in admitting when he was wrong on a bets, like the bets that we broke down last week talking about some Bruins series futures. So Money, I hope you got past those. You've emotionally recovered from those bets that were placed, and you're ready to be emotionally destroyed again with some Leafs bets here in the come playoff time.
Yeah, those Boston bets were tough, but I know Dom was on the other side of that. He was very bullish on Boston going in, and I'm sitting here with the Bruins missing the playoffs. So, but
it was close.
But we move on.
Yeah, it was close. No need to patronize him there. So Money had to feel that throughout the course of the video. That was his idea, and if you haven't seen that, you can go back and watch it here on the Edgework YouTube channel. But let's get into this Leafs Tampa series here. Predictions, previews, projections, concerns, anything like that, whether it be for either side. But basically breaking this one down, Toronto comes into this one. They finished second in the Atlantic. Obviously, Boston ran away from that one very long ago and was basically uncatchable for pretty much everyone around the NHL. And that pretty much set the tone for where we were going to go for the first round matchup between Toronto and Tampa. Basically, all that was left to be determined was who was going to get home ice, and Toronto finishes that one up, finishing pretty far ahead of Tampa as it came down the last couple of weeks, basically opening that gap up. But as we look around at some of the different sports books that have posted odds, I pulled together some of the best ones available right now, and one of the prices that we're looking at for Toronto, minus 150, a 60% implied probability. You look around as well, you can find Tampa plus 130 just on a series price. So before we get into spreads or anything like that, I mean, Dom, I'll go to you first in terms of where we're looking at in terms of implied probability and projection breakdown of the Leafs' probability of winning this series. You look at a minus 150. If you're coming into this one based on what we know about Toronto, how they played through the regular season, how Tampa was, and the fact that Tampa's coming off of 3 consecutive trips to the Stanley Cup Finals, do you think that this price is accurate? Does Toronto deserve to be favored like this against Tampa Bay in this series?
I think if you ask me and my model, that's always biased towards the Leafs. This is a price that's too short. I have Leafs around minus 170, but I think minus 150 is pretty fair if you factor in the fact that the Lightning sort of let their foot off the gas. Everyone feels like they can flip a switch. The Leafs are the Leafs. It seems fair to me, and I think people who believe that the Leafs are chokers forever, it's a nice price to get Tampa Bay as underdogs, but at the same time, they haven't looked like themselves over the last couple of months, and that's one of the big considerations for sure, and why I still think the Leafs are deserved favorites. This team looks a bit more complete than recent iterations, and I'm going to go with them. I'm going to stick with them, but it obviously scares me having a price that is higher than the market on them.
Right. And so money. I mean, I know we've talked about here throughout the course of the show, like your belief in the Leafs here. Does that kind of reflected in the line? Is that pretty much accurate to where you're at?
Yeah, I think that the Leafs are a deserving favorite around 60%. I've got them right there as well, where they should be. I just view this team as it's a different team this year. They're I think they have more depth. They're better defensively. And Dom kind of alluded to this as well, that we keep waiting for Tampa Bay to turn it on. They might, but this is not the same Tampa Bay team that we've seen in the past who've been able to turn it on. They're weaker defensively. They have less depth. Vasilevsky, he's fine, of course, right? But and if you want to talk about the Leafs being chokers, well, I don't even see last year's series as being a choking series, right? In Game 6, they're going into that game up 3-2. They actually got down in that game 2-0. They came back to take a 3-2 lead. That's not what chokers do, right? Tampa Bay tied it up on a 5-on-3 power play, and then you flip a coin in overtime, right? So if you're telling me that they're a coin flip away from winning that series in Game 6 in Tampa Bay, I will tell you that team last year is not a choking team. They lost on a coin flip. And this year, they're even stronger, while Tampa Bay is a bit weaker, right? So that's the reason why I'm higher on Toronto this year.
Yeah, and Michael, I mean, coming here wearing the Islanders hat, you're ready to go with that, talking about Islanders and maybe some dislike for the Leafs. But even that being said, is this price, like in your opinion, you kind of come into this one, do the Leafs deserve to be favored here to you as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I saw when they opened minus 140 here in the States. I texted my partner who, I mean, it used to be So Money. Now it's Nick Martin. And I said, this is going to close like minus 155, minus 160, I bet. And we kind of went back and forth and talked to Alex Moretto as well about it. He had the same kind of feelings about the line. And so I'm just waiting. I think that if you're going to bet the Lightning, you can probably wait it out to get maybe plus 140 on Tampa. And I think what we're looking at here is like something I always remind people when we get to the playoffs, which is you need to almost put like the computer aside for a second in the playoffs and take out a pencil and start handicapping almost like a boxing match and look around the edges. And Ilya Samsonov's been great, right? But no one's going to give the edge in goal to the Leafs here. And then you look at the power plays. Basically the same, right? Top 5 units. Which one is going to get the rub of the luck is kind of going to be the one that ends up being the better power play unit in this postseason. Both teams around middle of the pack in terms of penalty kill. So around the edges, I think things are okay. But then the elephant in the room is the same elephant in the room we had last year. And so Money and I talked about this ad nauseum last year. We talked about it ad nauseum this year, which is who are the Tampa Bay Lightning? Like they're the hardest team to handicap, I think, maybe in all of sports in this iteration of them, right? Like, I don't know which version of them is going to show up. I watched them take the Islanders to school 2 weeks ago, and I was like, damn, that looks like the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then they came to UBS Arena I know it was on the second night of a back-to-back after a gong show at the Garden, but they just didn't show up like at all. It was a lot of fun to be in the building that night. It never felt threatened at all. So which version of them is real? And I think that the benefit of the doubt probably goes to the team that's made the Stanley Cup Finals 3 years in a row. That whether you want to call it flipping a switch or whatever, I don't know, but they're going to be better than I think what we've seen. Right, they're 3-7 in the last 10, and it's not just the last couple of weeks they played meaningless hockey in the regular season. It's past 2 seasons. Like last year followed the same exact pattern. Not a lot of people are talking about that. They're like, the Bruins ran away with the Atlantic. The Panthers did the same thing last year too. And these two teams, the Leafs and Lightning, kind of just played meaningless hockey from the holidays on. So that all adds up into this kind of weird soup with the Lightning, where I think you really need to think about them as in a bigger picture way, rather than looking at, all right, but they haven't looked great these past few weeks. And look, who knows if Victor Hedman is which version of him is going to show up. He's not been great this season, but then you got Mikhail Sergachev's taken a step forward. Nicholas Perbix, who all of us have heard about before this season, I'm sure. Like, he's been great, like a minor revelation for them. So when you break it down, I think like the margins for error here are so thin, no matter what series you look at, basically, maybe throwing out like whoever plays the Bruins, unless it's the Islanders, of course. But it's the margins for error is so thin. So it's going to be a bounce, and I'll take the goalie. Like, I just always will. So I'll be likely on the Lightning, but we'll talk about spreads. I'll probably go chase a bigger price. I know so many knows I'm a sucker for stuff like that. So finding a way to turn a win into a loss.
Yeah, well, you talk about the meaningless hockey. It's kind of like the Tampa Bay team kind of adapted what Golden State had done during that period of time where they were going on their run where it was like finals appearance after finals appearance. And you look at them the first couple of years, yeah, they set records and they do all that. And then it was like after that, they just didn't care. Get to the playoffs and then worry about it there. And this kind of seems like what Tampa had done. But I do want to ask you guys, you look at this Tampa team, some concerns possibly for them. Yeah, okay, you get a little bit older. It is what it is. There's guys on Toronto who are a little bit older. They did go out and acquire some older players as well. Like, there's no hiding the fact that they have a 39-year-old defenseman in Mark Giordano who is logging big minutes. But when you look at the Tampa team, 3 consecutive Cup finals. One of them was in the bubble year that went right into the summer. Now you're going in here where basically after 3 straight years, you have had the least amount of rest of any team in the NHL. How much fatigue could actually possibly play a factor for this Lightning team into this round, or maybe has played a factor through the regular season? And now that you're kind of kicked out onto the other side of the regular season, do you think maybe there was a ability for them to actually just rest up based on the fact that they did play this meaningless hockey through the regular season and now they're playoff ready?
I mean, I don't know, because the last couple of weeks, it seems like they've actually tried to get things back in the gear. The game against the Leafs, it seemed like that was an important game to them. Today, or I guess yesterday, whenever the show comes out, they played all their starters except Mikhail Sergachev. These games aren't exactly meaningless to them. They're trying to get into gear for the playoffs and figure their game out, because right now it's not where it needs to be. And I think fatigue might be a big issue for someone like Hedman, who's logged the most minutes out of anyone on the Lightning and who we've all said has not really looked like Victor Hedman. And if he doesn't look like Hedman in this series, that's a big game changer, because one of the advantages Tampa has is that they have the best defensemen on the ice almost all the time with Hedman and Sergachev. If Hedman is looking like he has this year, that isn't as large of an advantage.
Yeah, I think that Tampa Bay, as Dom said, it's not like they were packing it in. They were trying, right? Like you look at that game at Madison Square Garden. You don't think they wanted to win that game, right? Even against the Leafs, the last game, they still started Vasilevsky, right? So of course they wanted to win that game, and the number one reason why I know they wanted to win that game was Cooper's comments afterwards. For him to come out and say that game had no intensity and it was an exhibition game, like all that gamesmanship tells me that he knew that he wanted to win that game as well. Otherwise, there's no reason to put that game down, right? So, I think that they're having trouble turning it on, and we see that sometimes with veteran teams. A lot of times, you go so long playing, right? 2-3 years, you make deep runs, and sometimes you just lose it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you come back the next year and you try to follow that up.
All right, let's go into some series predictions here in terms of spreads, how we're going to look at playing this one, maybe the best way to go about it, something you guys are looking at in terms of where you could find value on, kind of where your projections might sit at. And Michael, I will start with you because I do know where So Money is going with his. We've already talked about it a few different times. So we'll start with yours because I think you might have a kind of a differing opinion of where we're going to be at on this. And maybe it's more just, maybe it is out of spite a little bit. Maybe it's more in terms of where you can find some of the value on things. But obviously, you can shop around for some of these different prices, and we will do so and make sure you get the best prices. You can do so on the BetStamp app here, which is a presenting or a sponsor here of the Edgework Show, so make sure to check that out. But in terms of series spreads, what is a direction that you would look to go to in this one? It kind of feels like this could be a tight series. Again, if you're going down that direction of, hey, they're going to be even, maybe it's going to come down to the goaltending edge. So, Michael, what would a direction be that you would go in if you're going to bet this series? Maybe not just straight up, okay, Tampa to win. How would this be played in your perspective?
Yeah, a couple of different ways I want to handicap this is the narrative around the series is going to be, they played 7 last year. There was an overtime game and a clincher. Margins are thin. All that stuff is going to make the kind of derivatives, I think, go up in value a little bit. So like a Tampa Bay -2.5, something like that on them to win, 4-1 or 4-0. You're going to get value on it. Is it likely to win? No, but you're going to get 5-1 or so on a number like that. I think that's interesting. I also have some interest in betting Tampa Bay in game 1. We'll see where that price comes out because Ilya Samsonov won't have played now for, what's it going to be, 10 days, a week, whatever it's going to be. And that's a little concerning for a goalie, no matter who you are, I think. And I trust Vasilevsky in that situation more than I would trust someone like Ilya Samsonov. So I'm going to look at it that way. And I will say, like, in all likelihood, I think that the odds in the series look in terms of favoritism are right. Like Toronto, home ice advantage, better regular season, deserve to be favored. But in a 7-game sample, like anything can happen. So you want to kind of lean into that, especially in round 1, and that's where you're going to find the value. So like a Tampa -1.5, -2.5 is probably where I'm going to end up, rather than just taking the money line and, like I said, finding a way to turn a win into a loss.
Right. And Dom, if you're looking at this one, a series projection on a spread or something like that. Now, I can understand where Michael's coming from, saying, okay, maybe Tampa takes that one. Game 1, I understand the concerns of Samsonov as a Leafs fan myself, someone who follows them along very closely. I can see that. I was hoping that he was going to play in the game against the Rangers on Thursday night, just in terms of getting yourself ready closer to. I do have that same thought process in terms of Vasilevsky. I would trust more in extended rest period than Samsonov going into that one. But you're kind of looking at a spot here where if the Leafs can grab maybe that first game and then flip that momentum and grab the 2 at home and change with the narrative from where they were at last year, where it was the split at home and then going back to Tampa, I mean, you kind of have to map out a little bit how you think the series might go. How much does yours differ here, Dom? And do you kind of share the same concerns about Samsonov in game 1 after all this rest?
Yeah, I think that's a definite consideration, especially with the reason he's resting, which is he's a little banged up, and that's never something you want to hear with your starting goalie. I like what Mike was saying about the derivatives and sort of the things people don't really expect to happen that have value just because they aren't expected, but those things can hit sometimes. It's not likely, it's not often, and you probably will lose money doing it, but when they hit real nice. And when we were talking before the show about correct series scores, I quickly checked what I had, and the only edge I have is Leafs sweep, which no one's thinking the Leafs are sweeping this series. So I think that is a fun little sprinkle to put on if you think the Leafs are going to win the series, because I think one of the things is that the Leafs have been stuck in round 1 purgatory for so long, and we all think they're going to 7 and maybe choking or maybe breaking through. But what if they just break through like immediately in this like massive way from, I guess, all these years of being pent up, of being stuck here? Maybe they just get it out right away and just steamroll through, sort of like I'm I'm trying to think of an example, but I remember a couple of years ago when Nashville beat Chicago en route to the Cup final, and they swept them, even though they were in 8th seed. I think some of that was like really unexpected, but Nashville was sort of building towards that kind of thing. I'm saying. I also have value on Leafs to win in 6 or less, so same idea, but it's the idea of the series not being as close as maybe most people would expect.
Right. And so, Money, you kind of fall into a similar category there of like even the thought process of like, hey, maybe the Leafs break through and they just break through big. And would you be able to talk a little bit about where you find that value and kind of your perspective on how that may come about?
Yeah, so I think the Leafs are going to win this series, but I don't see any value on betting them for the series based on where I have my probability. Now, if this series does go to a game 7 and I'm betting the Leafs in game 7, it's going to be shorter odds than I would have betting the series right now. So it doesn't make sense to bet them to win the series. Now, in terms of them breaking out, yeah, I completely agree with Dom here. Like, and we kind of got a glimpse of that in 2011 with the Canucks. You know, I'm going to bring up the Canucks, right? So, in 2011, they lost to Chicago a couple of times, and then that series against Chicago, they actually got up 3-0. Now, we don't need to talk about what happened after that, but they did get up 3-0, and they were right there breaking out, right? So, it could be similar like that. I don't. The sweep right now is 10-1, which looks very enticing, right? I don't think Tampa Bay will be swept. I don't see it happening again with this core because it already happened against Columbus. So I think that there's some element of that built into this core that I don't see them getting swept again. But losing in 5, that's where I have it. If the Leafs break through, it's because Michael's Samsonov concerns were taken care of. They were able to get to Vasilevsky. All those things where they're able to break out, it would all come all at once, in my opinion. And if everything comes all at once, then it should be a quick series. So I think that is where the value is.
Well, Michael, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on Samsonov here, and more than just, okay, game 1. Yeah, that's a very strong possibility that could be a little bit of a concern coming off all that rest. But this is a guy who hasn't necessarily proven much in terms of his career. Yes, he's had a very good season. I think a lot of Leafs fans in particular are really impressed with the body of work that he's put together. But one thing that's kind of stood out, especially here, is home road splits. And over the last little while, there was, okay, what do you do about getting into a playoffs? Do you split Murray and Samsonov? I think that's kind of being dispelled at this point. It's just going to be Samsonov as your number one guy. But even looking at this throughout this season, Samsonov at home, 19-3-3. 927 save percentage, and then on the road he was 8-7-2. Now more recently he's kind of bumped some of his numbers up, now at a 909. But you talk about the goaltending edge and the fact that for Tampa Bay, for the most part, you can pretty much just bank on Vasilevsky, being the guy that they've known him to be. He's a true playoff competitor. The way that he bounces back after losses was something that was constantly brought up last year. Is like, this guy doesn't lose back-to-back. That was a huge thing for him in the playoffs. For the Leafs, a major concern could possibly be the goaltending. Outside of that, I think that it is fairly even, but how much weight do you put on the Samsonov situation beyond game 1 and just throughout the remainder of the series there?
So I'll begin by saying I think he's a good goalie. And as someone who would be rooting against the Leafs, I'd much rather see Matt Murray in goal, and I was thrilled when they made that move in the offseason. But I think it's actually, if you take like a bigger look at it, and this is what I'm talking about, handicapping a little bit, and I think what so many was saying before was really interesting about the problems kind of presenting themselves all at once, is like you kind of need to envision. So like, let's say he struggles game 1. What that does in your city, which is bizarre in terms of the way it covers its hockey team, which at some point I'm a little jealous of because we don't get any coverage of our hockey team on Long Island, but it just puts a decision in Sheldon Keefe's lap, right? Like, if let's say he gets lit up in game one, whether it's rust or whatever, and whether he bounces back and they lose like 3-2 in overtime at home, maybe game two, and they're down 2-0. What it does is it changes the tenor of the entire series. Comes down to a big decision from the coach. And I don't know if I would trust that coach to make the right decision, which for me would probably be you just go back unless he is banged up. Like this injury is like a bigger concern than anything. Like you'd probably just keep going back to him because he's got the bigger, better body of work this season. Whereas I haven't seen Matt Murray play a hockey game in quite some time. But that stuff really matters in a playoff series. Whereas like in a regular season game, if Samsonov struggles, has a dud against the Ottawa Senators or something. Whether you go back to him or not the next night, I mean, in Toronto, sure, like it's going to be headline news, but in reality, it's not. Like you're going to have 15, 20 more games in the regular season to kind of recalibrate. In the playoffs, you just got to get that decision right. So that kind of stuff I think does matter here. So if that's where my concerns aren't as much with the goaltender himself, but rather like the kind of baggage that comes with it, especially after what we've seen out of the Leafs goalies. And I do think like as good as his numbers have been all season, the playoffs are different from the regular season. I know that's a cliche, but the way I look at it is a little differently from that, which is you're not playing in the regular season. You're going to maybe you catch the Lightning one night, but you're going to play the Canadians or the Red Wings the next night. And those teams are a lot easier to play goalie against than Tampa Bay night after night. Like you're not seeing Nikita Kucherov every night and whatever. So that's where my trust in Vasilevsky against an elite team like Toronto comes into play, rather than my trust in someone like Samsonov to be able to cope with 7 games, 4 games, however many games of a really, really talented offensive team. So, those are my concerns, but I'll fully admit that like, if as someone rooting against the Leafs, I'm upset that the Matt Murray decision isn't going to come in game one.
Right. And I mean, Dom, you follow the team closely. You look at the Samsonov situation. Do you kind of have some of the similar concerns? And then outside of that, I mean, you'll now look at where the Leafs goalies are. Matt Murray is concussed right now. That's kind of what allowed them to have this whole goalie circus of the amateur tryout goaltenders coming up and down with the team, and Joseph Woll finally being allowed to be recalled. It looks like Joseph Woll would probably be the guy who is going to be backing him up potentially game one here, depending on Matt Murray's health. But where do you kind of fit in on the goalie situation that goes on here in Toronto? Because it does seem to be the biggest point of concern heading into this series.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is don't sleep on Joseph Woll, who has been lights out in the NHL so far and is sort of giving shades of Matt Murray when he started off with the Penguins, sort of this relative unknown newcomer who comes in and just plays lights out in the playoffs and basically helps the Pens win the cup. Is Joseph Woll next Matt Murray? Probably not, but he's been surprisingly very good in his 6 games this year in his 10-game NHL career, that I feel a little more at ease knowing that he's either the third option or even the second option if Samsonov does falter. Samsonov does make me nervous a bit, but I think the biggest thing is that this Leafs team defensively is probably the best we've seen in maybe all of our lifetimes, and that really helps insulate a goalie like Samsonov, who is nowhere near Andrei Vasilevsky's level, but maybe for a series can look the part just from facing easier shots.
Right. So, Money, any thoughts from you on the goaltending situation here in Toronto?
I was going to say the same thing, that if you look at Samsonov in a vacuum, yes, he's nowhere near where Vasilevsky is, and there's no debating that. But the team around him is a lot better. There was a time early this season when we were betting Leafs unders constantly. Their opponent team total unders, Leaf game unders, and we just kept on doing it until we adjusted to where it should be, because this is a much better Leafs team defensively. And with the additions that they made later in the season with my guy Luszczyszyn, I think that they're better equipped to hopefully not put Samsonov in those positions where Samsonov does need to stand on his head, and he's just good enough, like where Kemper was last year, where he's good enough to get that win.
Right. All right. Well, to close this one off, let's go round table here. Give best bet or like a series prediction. Where do you go in this series? What is something you'd be playing? And what is your final prediction of series score for either side? So Money, we'll start with you. Series prediction, Tampa, Toronto. Where do you get to on this one?
I go Leafs in 5.
Okay. If you were to bet this series, what is a price you would be willing to come in at? What is a number that you'd be looking at to bet Leafs in 5, 4-1 final?
So I got to be careful here because I'm okay with the number right now. I'm just waiting for the market to mature a bit. Leafs in 5 plus 450 plus 500. I think that's where I want to be.
All right, and Michael, I know that you're going opposite side here. You're going fade the Leafs in this situation. Series prediction, and then as well, maybe it's not just a lightning in situation, but what would be a best bet that you would have for this series coming out of this one?
Yeah, my favorite bet actually is a to lead the series in goals bet, and I like Kel Järnkrok. He's 35-1. If it is a short series, right, like, it's not going to take much to lead the both teams in goals, and looks like he's going to play some first line minutes on a really good first line. 35-1 on that. I mean, if you just switched his name with someone who's got a little bit more like recognition, and put that person up there, whether it be like a Michael Bunting or someone, I think that number would probably be halved. So that'd be my favorite bet available on the board right now, is getting Järnkrok at 35-1 and just hoping you get really lucky.
All right, I like that one, especially knowing the situations Järnkrok's kind of been thrown in so far this year. The fact that he does play better in the top 6 than he does in the bottom 6, Leafs likely to kind of try to find a spot for him up in there. But then finally, a series prediction for you on this one?
Yeah, I'll stick with it. I'll say Lightning 4-2, and they take game 1, and the city doesn't burn down after game 1. I promise. It's okay. You can still win a series after you lose game 1.
No, it might burn down. It might burn down. There's no guarantees that it won't. And Dom, finally for you, series prediction and best bet in this one.
I'm gonna say screw it and just go with Leafs in 4. Why not? I don't care if they do in 4, 5, 6, 7. Just win, and that would be my main bet, is just to take the minus 150 and pray to all the hockey gods every morning, every afternoon, every night that they finally do it. But I am going to go full passion mode, full optimist, full dumbass, and say Leafs in 4.
Yeah, well, that's what I keep saying to So Money when we've talked about it. I just say, like, I don't care how it happens. Just please give me one round. Like, I would like to see one round. That's all. I want to get to round 2. Please, just get us there. But
I can tell you all about round 2. It's a delightful place to be. It's a really delightful place to be. And even round 3 is great. Man, it's so beautiful.
Don't want to hear
tips on if you play the Bruins too, because we beat the Bruins in a series where we were big underdogs. I can give you tons of advice on what it's like on this side of the window.
No, this is not what I want to be hearing as we go into this one. I have enough scars from this Leafs team. I basically have gone into the series concerned about the Leafs. I've gone in overly optimistic this year. I basically have just said to everyone, this is the year I'm going in. I don't care. We'll figure it out after. Like, I'll just deal with the aftermath. Just get me through round 1. That's my thoughts on this year. But yeah, it's a scarring experience being a Leafs fan. But thank you to everyone who tuned in here. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure to subscribe here to the Edgework HQ YouTube channel. Make sure to like this video. If you disagree with anything that was said, if you agree with anything that was said, drop it below in the comments as well. So Money, Michael, Dom, thank you guys for taking the time to do this. Good luck on your bets throughout the playoffs. Good luck with the support of the Leafs. So Money, I know you're hopping on here, a Western team and an Eastern team, so good luck to you in both those ventures. And Michael, good luck to you with the Islanders until, as So Money is hoping for, the Leafs Islanders Eastern Conference final. If that plays out the way So Money envisions it to, then we'll have to revisit this conversation at that point in time. But until then, guys, good luck on your bets, and thank you for taking the time to do this.